Welcome to our meditation retreat. It's wonderful to see that so many of you made it here despite the events of the last few days. If there's been any doubt in anybody's mind about the urgency of change in human consciousness, it's become very, very obvious now how urgent that inner transformation has become. If we are not to be condemned to repeat the past over and over. To repeat the past, history, the collective human past, a lot of which is a succession of events, dreadful violence that we witnessed recently, and also the past within, the conditioning of the human mind, the structures, the old patterns, that to some extent are still there in everyone. In some humans in a much more acute form. So we are here to go beyond that conditioning, deep-seated. And to go beyond that requires alertness, attention, presence. So I'd like to open the retreat by ringing this bell, and the sound of that bell is a call to attention. And that is our continuous task for the next few days. To be in the state of alert attention that does not deny anything that's happening, allows it to be, in a state of openness. So our task in the next few days is to allow this moment to be. Any emotions that are part of this moment, also allow them to be. And that allowing creates a space around it. If it's an emotion, through allowing it, and emotions will come up, especially at this time. And not to deny, we are not here to deny any of that, but to allow it so completely that through the act of allowing, a spaciousness arises around what is. That is the essence of spiritual realization. That's also the origin from where comes all healing, renewal, and not so much to be aware of that spaciousness around events, of anything that arises at this moment, realizing that that is the essence of who you are. You are not that which arises. You are the field in which it arises. That is the deepest core. So I'm starting the meditation retreat already by giving you the essence of it. So you could even go home after this. If you knew that deeply with every cell of the body and immediately see it deeply, then that's it. And then you would realize also the truth that is so beautifully expressed in this big book, Course in Miracles. It's at the very beginning, there's a summary. It says, these lines summarize the whole course. And they say, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. To allow this moment to be requires you to be in that state of alert attention. Otherwise, that which arises at this moment as a thought, an emotion, or an external event will draw you in completely. Your sense of self will be drawn into that. This is to be identified with thinking. The continuous stream of thought means your thought stream draws in your attention so completely that you're totally trapped in the conditioned structures of thought. And that state of inattention is the state out of which what we call evil, which is deep unconsciousness, arises. So the root of that deep unconsciousness that manifests as evil in the world is the state of being asleep, spiritually speaking. Completely trapped in conditioned mind patterns. So our task here is to be aware of that in ourselves. That which arises, whatever arises at this moment, within or without, to be able to watch that, be with it, be open to it. And then there's always something greater than that which happens, whether that which happens is a happy or an unhappy event. They come and go in any case. If you want to cling to a happy event, or a happy thought, or a happy emotion, then of course, after a little while, that comes to an end. Or if you feel threatened by an unhappy event, or an unhappy emotion, then you get drawn into reactivity. And the world becomes a fearful place, because there are so many things that are to be feared inside yourself and outside. Many thousands of people died a violent death not far from here last week. The mind seeks an explanation. I don't want to give you any facile explanations. First of all, to see that that's what happened. Of course, every physical form comes to an end. But it always seems very sad if it comes to a very premature and violent end in that way. And we become aware of how fragile the fabric of phenomenal existence is, how quickly what seems so solid and real can dissolve. And what looks so tragic from a normal perspective, and it is, if you have read accounts of people who faced the imminent possibility of death and survived, or people who underwent a so-called near-death experience, there's one common factor that most of them speak about. They speak about the fear that is there up to almost the very end. And then the last few seconds, an accident seems inevitable. Somehow they survived, so later they could talk about it. An accident seemed inevitable, And the last few seconds, many of those survivors speak of suddenly great serenity and peace came. And you have a similar account in near-death experiences where it seems that people already went into death. And many of them described those last few moments as a sense of deep peace and a sense of all is well. That seems contradictory when the survival of their physical form was threatened. But at the last moment, a shift happened. And suddenly there was a deep sense of rightness even there, which from an external perspective seems impossible. And that is that peace that comes, and I'm sure it came to many of those who died in the last few seconds. It came to me. I died psychologically, and the whole psychological structure of the self died through intense suffering. And again, there was the same experience of deep peace suddenly when it all collapsed. There is another side to it. Even to what looks like an unmitigated tragedy and disaster. It's on the surface, this is not the case when you look at it from the surface. There is the redemptive factor at work. And that is the realization that you are not this form identity as which you appear temporarily in this world. And when your form identity, your existence as this form, physical form, is threatened, truly threatened, then there's the possibility of spiritual awakening. And the strange thing is, in some cases, the spiritual awakening, or what I call the flowering of consciousness, can come to a person in the last 5 seconds of his or her life. And it doesn't matter. The flowering is there. And according to the ancient Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is read by the monk to the dying person, even after the physical body has died, there's a thread that runs through the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and that is at various stages, even after that, the possibility for you to recognize your essential nature comes several times. You miss it, and then another possibility comes. If you miss them all, then okay, then, as they say, I'm not wanting you to believe anything, but the book then says, then okay, you reincarnate again. If you miss that, then you will be forced into the cycle of reincarnation. But please, I don't want to give you any new belief structures. Just, and I don't want to give you I don't want this to be a comforting belief, because we want to go deeper than that. So when your survival is threatened as a form identity, there is always the possibility of awakening out of identification with this form, and that your survival as a form identity can appear in 2 ways. One is your physical existence is threatened by something, imminent death of the physical. It can also be that the survival of your psychological form identity as the mind-made sense of me, the self, with my story and my history and my unhappiness, and happiness occasionally, that is threatened or imminent, has reached a point of imminent collapse, sometimes because the suffering is so acute that it cannot sustain itself anymore. And there also is the possibility of sudden disidentification from form, which is mind structures and emotional structures. Before, consciousness was totally identified with those structures, and suddenly it removes itself, so to speak. And this is very, when you speak of it later, people use different words and some cannot express it at all because it defies language. What is it that happens at that point of realization? And some people to whom it happened all they can say, and this was the case with me when I died psychologically, all I could say was, there's so much peace suddenly, both within, and it even seems as if the peace were outside, even in the traffic. It seems to be even in there. I couldn't understand it. So many say such serenity, such peacefulness, and yet aliveness, and perhaps cannot explain any further where does that come from? What is that? In the very face of death and disaster, how could that suddenly appear? And then, fortunately, there's a further possibility for that awakening. Otherwise, you would have to wait for disaster to happen, or your physical death. The other possibility arises through spiritual teaching, not teaching in the form of learning new things, but the power of a teaching that arises out of that state of realization. And all then a few pointers are given, but there's a power behind those pointers. And so one could say, you are here also to die to your form identity, to your complete identification with me as this physical, psychological form, which is a very fearful state. Because everybody knows, no matter how much you deny it, that it's only a matter of time before that goes. Whether it goes when you reach the age of 95 or 100, whether it goes in a violent explosion created by a madman, or whether it goes when you least expect it and you slip on a banana skin and break your neck and it's gone. Death comes in many disguises, but it's always the same. So we honor for a moment those thousands of people that died, and we are not denying that on one level, yes, it is deeply sad and tragic. And we also see that there is a deeper level to it. And not as a belief that tries to reinterpret it and just to make it okay so that we don't suffer so much. No. Just to see the impermanence of all forms, life forms, to see how fragile this fabric of phenomenal existence is, of forms, to recognize that. That recognition is the beginning of something else. It's strange. It seems, what does it mean when you see, isn't it sad that every form of life is so short-lived? Shouldn't we be weeping every day because each one of us is condemned to death? If you could have a little date on you. Each one would have a date if you knew it, and you could read it on your hand or something. You see, oh, that's how much time I've got left. And that is the truth. And it is a miracle that humans are not continuously wailing and weeping because they are condemned to death, all of us. And why are they not continuously weeping and wailing? Because underneath it there is a recognition that that is not the ultimate truth. Otherwise nobody could even live any longer. Why do anything? Why carry on with anything? It's all going to dissolve anyway. Of course it is. And even your children, they are going to die too. It's all dissolving like dust. If it doesn't dissolve violently, it dissolves through the passage of time, and it goes fairly quickly too. So if you saw this room and a speeded up version on a film, which condenses 2,000 years into 1 minute, and 2,000 years is very little on a planetary or cosmic level, then even the seemingly solid objects, you would see them crumbling to dust. They're already crumbling to dust, it's just you can't see it. And that would be an amazing eye-opener if you could see all of phenomenal existence within 1 minute, gone. Now, let's see, if the whole world were one color, let's say, if everything were green, every object, every being green, the color green would not exist for you, of course, because you would have nothing to differentiate it from. Now, the whole world, everything that appears in this world is impermanent, is dissolving already, every form, including this form. If there were nothing else, remember the analogy I just gave you with green, if there were nothing else, you wouldn't even know it. If there were only green, there would be no green. If there were only impermanence, there wouldn't even be the knowledge of impermanence. The very fact that you can know it and see it and be aware of it, not as a thought, but just as an awareness, an aware presence, and there's simply the looking, there's simply the seeing of it. So if you see how a form dissolves slowly or violently, and simply your eyes remain open, so to speak, I'm using seeing both literally and metaphorically, and you're simply in that state of open, almost astonishment, and you see the forms, the flux, the continuous coming and going, birth and death of all these life forms. And you see it. The seeing of it is the beginning of the awakening, is already the awakening. It seems insignificant to see it, because after you've seen it, the mind will come in and say something about it. That's not it. The mind might draw some conclusion and say, okay, so that means I'm not going to do anything anymore because it's pointless anyway. So what's the point of it all? I mean, I just might as well go home and get drunk. Or that's the mental conclusion. It leads you astray again. So if we can remain with the seeing, the pure seeing of it, and not come to any mental conclusions about it, and stay with the seeing of the coming and going of forms, not only as death, also of all forms that come into your life and then leave you again, come and leave you. Wow. And there you are, present. There's a presence, suddenly, that seeing, that awareness is, we need to be very careful here. At this point, it would be best for me to walk out of the room, stop speaking. But that would throw the Omega Institute into disarray, and they would have to give you your money back. When I give it more labels now, there's always the danger that you get lost in mental labels, and if you don't realize that every word I say is simply a pointer, just a different pointer, slightly different perspective. And here, what comes together here is what at the very beginning today, I said, allowing this moment to be. That is the openness to what is. What arises and then goes away again, is born into this moment. It's born and then it leaves. To allow it to be, and that is the same. It's just now a different perspective on it. Is to see how all the forms that appear in your life as the form that this moment takes, there's only this moment ever, to see that and allow it to be. Allow the impermanent nature of the arising forms to be, and see it. You don't even need to mentally label it, not even say, yes, it's all impermanent. So it's a state of open awareness in which that is recognized. That is enormously liberating, to see it, to recognize it without drawing any conclusions. And that is what is arising already from within you, is that which is beyond birth and death and the arising of forms. The awareness itself that sees. And it is that which people who face imminent death, perhaps in the last few seconds of their lives, realize. That is the disidentification from form, from having your sense of self completely identified with a particular form, and then spend the rest of your life in a reactive relationship to whatever happens at this moment, the little me reacting. Every form either will enhance your sense of form identity. I need this, I need you, I'm not going to let this go, I'm not going to let you go. Or other forms threaten your sense of form identity. Go away, don't want this. I don't want this moment, what's happening, I don't like what's happening. Push away what's happening at this moment. That's a very common thing. It's threatening, forms are threatening. So when you are only here as a little form identity, you are in a continuous reactive relationship to what happens around you. Personalized and reactive. And you're always looking out for the next threat to your form existence, often psychological threat, defensive and hold back. What does he want? What does he want from me? Or you're looking out for something to enhance this always deficient sense of self. How can I feel more secure? I need to add something to who I am. And maybe I can add you. Maybe if you all think that I'm great, then I can add that. That would be great, wouldn't it? So the need to add more to who I think I am, to strengthen my form identity, is there in the absence of the recognition of that which is beyond form as who you truly are. So when you don't know that you are condemned to reenact those egoic patterns. Egoic means simply identified with form as me, physical and psychological image of me, my story, which is not complete enough, therefore I need to add more. And the little me might even look for enlightenment because it thinks that it is an experience or it is a firework that I can add to the store of my experiences as the supreme experience, because I've already got the big car and the big house. I've got that in my sack of experiences already, but it's not enough. I thought it would be, but it isn't. So I'm now looking for the greatest experience to add, and then I'll be okay. Of course, when I'm enlightened, I'll be okay. So I'm looking for an event in time to happen, and that's going to be it. And surely it will be some big fireworks going off inside, probably, when I'm enlightened. And of course, it's possible that fireworks may go off inside you. It might be a beautiful spiritual experience. And then it comes to an end. And then you say, oh, now I need another one. So we are not here, well, maybe one or two of you came for that reason, but we are not here to have a spiritual experience. That would be frustrating. Because even if you do have one, and many of you won't, even if you do have one, you'd have to go home again. that somebody wrote this book recently. I haven't read it, but it has a nice title, which is, the book is called After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. So there is when you're identified with the mind is looking for more. The me, the mind-made me, is looking for more. It's looking to strengthen itself. It's looking to really, you want to know more deeply who you are. You want to truly know yourself. You want to strengthen your sense of self, of who I am. To finally arrive at that sense of really being yourself fully. And if necessary, if you are totally identified with those structures, in the complete absence of even the slightest awareness, completely trapped in form identity, completely and totally trapped in it, then killing 10,000 people to strengthen your identity means nothing. You don't even know them as human beings anymore, because all you can see is the mental concepts in your head. You live in a conceptualized, mind-made universe, so you deaden the moment, and you can see it in a slight manifestation, the moment you label somebody as this or that, already you have removed their aliveness from your awareness and deadened them a little bit. And then if you put another label on them and another one, then you're no longer aware of who this being is, because you're completely unaware of who you are. You're completely trapped in a conceptual mind, and so killing a human being means nothing, because you're not even aware what you're doing at all. There's the essence of human madness. And now, nobody in this room is at that level of unconsciousness where you're so trapped in your form identity that you would do anything to strengthen it and to be right. But those mind structures do operate in a more, not quite such a violent and total way, but in everyone, if you are alert, you can see your own mind structures that impose labels on other humans, on nature, on anything, and then relate not to that human being, but you suddenly have a screen between yourself and that human being, which is your mental label, and you're relating to that mental label. So that can arise not as completely in any of you as it still does in those humans who are totally, completely trapped in that. And of course there are areas on the planet where this human unconsciousness expresses itself in a particularly acute form. There are areas where there's continuous conflict, continuous, totally forced to reenact those very unconscious mind patterns again and again. So, and those people who live there, they live as in a nightmare. I read in the newspaper one Israeli woman said to an American a few days ago, a woman who lives in Israel said to an American visitor, "Welcome to my nightmare." And now, whenever you encounter a deeply unconscious human being who imposes these labels on you, and it's not only those mind structures, because those humans who are deeply unconscious are also completely unaware of the enormous amount of pain they carry within. And the pain, the collective human pain body that they carry within, emotional pain accumulated during thousands of years of human madness, and there it is in you, but you don't even know it. All it does, it amplifies your already insane mind structures. It means it gives them added emotional energy. And you don't even know that that's what's happening. And whenever you encounter a human like that, there's the danger that he or she may pull you also into unconsciousness, also into form identification. So the encounter with a highly unconscious human being is always, there's the question, when you encounter such a human being, are you going to be pulled into the same level of unconsciousness? And that danger is always there. And on a personal level, that happens when you encounter another human being with a strong pain body and is being acted out, and you're maybe attacking you, if not physically, verbally, accusing, you did this, that, you. And what the pain body wants, it wants you to have pain, so it can, and give me more pain too. It wants, please, pain, pain. And so unless you are very alert there, you will get drawn into that also. Reactivity will come in. That happens in relationships a lot. Mutual feeding of the pain body. And collectively, the challenge that collectively is being faced in America now is whether they collectively will be pulled to the same level as of unconsciousness. In which case, they would perpetrate the same deeds and would be saying, yes, we are justified in killing innocent people, they did it, we'll do it. So that is the challenge collectively, is not to be drawn, I'm not saying take no actions, action will happen, not to be drawn into that deep unconsciousness, which is total identification with form. Now this could be a belief, an emotion, it could be the collective form of our race, our nation, our tribe, our religion. Complete identification, and you're encapsulated in a form identity, but it's mind stuff, completely mind created. Encapsulated in a form identity that needs its enemies even to survive. It would lose its identity without its enemies, so it needs to continuously create enemies. That's the human madness. It's been going on for thousands of years. Totally encapsulated in form identity. People do it on a personal level also, and in certain cultures it tends to be more a collective form identity, which is even more mad than a totally personalized form identity, which is mad enough. And the greatest evils have come, were inflicted on humans by other humans, not by people who were trapped in a personalized form. Those are the so-called criminals. But the evil they do is nothing compared to what nations and tribes and religions do to other humans. It's just, it's a drop compared to a huge ocean. criminals are nothing. They just have matched the same madness, but it's personalized. But when you get the collective form identity, then you really see the madness of it. And what is form identity other than complete identification with mind? Really, the whole identity is mind structures. So the challenge that America is being faced with is to stay, not to be drawn completely into that as a reaction. And ours being together here this week is more significant as far as the collective consciousness is concerned, is more significant than it appears on the surface. A field, a group of human beings going beyond that, still relatively rare, but arising more and more on the planet. Although at the moment all you see is the unconsciousness which has resurfaced. And you find that in yourself too, on a personal level. The resurfacing of old mind structures can happen also in yourself. It may even happen during these days. Occasionally, your pain body may come up. Now, the expression of that won't be as violent as the madness we are witnessing now, but the root of it is the same, identification with form, with complete absence of spacious awareness. And then, of course, a complete inability to see any other mental position than the one that you identified with, which is your form identity. A total inability to see any other perspective than this one. That is because this is me, or us, which is a big me. But that is the same in a milder form. It arises in you perhaps tonight when you're talking to somebody and you're having a discussion. And a certain emotional violence flows into defending your standpoint. Because you know you're right. And there comes the emotion with it. And you can, if you sense within yourself the enormous momentum behind mind structures energized by emotion, and when you speak, if you can observe, perhaps, and it seems not related, how is that related to the destruction of what happened a few days ago? And the strange thing is, it is related. To see, it seems so harmless to defend your point of view, but it's, if you at the root, this is the root of the same unconsciousness. I'm not saying no longer have any point of view. No, you have a point of view, and say this is my point of view. But the strange thing is, whatever you express through the mind, any thought you have concerning something, is one perspective on it. Any situation, one perspective. Okay, you could shift and move to another perspective. It could be true too, but not a single one is totally true. About almost any country in the world, one could probably put a credible case that this country is the worst country on earth. And then you could put a credible case that this country is the best country on earth. Perspectives, viewpoints, mental positions. The truth is far greater. You can never encapsulate it in one mental position. Again, express a mental position, but not be a mental position. When you are a mental position, what you can still do is that you know that this is what's happening. Here we go again. So let's see if and America, it happens to be where the greatest concentration of energy is on the planet. So what happens here is decisive for the future of the planet. And is it going to go more unconscious? Or which way is it going to go in the face of this challenge? America is a country of extremes. There are, even before this happens, there are extremes of violence, extremes of this, extremes of bigness, extremes of also spiritual things arising. Extremes of good and bad. Enormous, because there's so much energy here, you can see the extremes of good and bad more clearly. And so this is why it's so important what happens here now for humanity. We were driving yesterday. The only way I could get here was to fly to Toronto and then drive down here. And we were in the car, maybe halfway down, and we were overtaking this car, and on the rear window, the driver had written in big white letters 2 lines. The bottom line read, "God bless America," which is fine. And the top line said, "Kill them all." And we were overtaking this car with a Canadian license plate. I was hoping that them all did not include Canadians. So it's in a strange way, it's all related. Us being here, what we are engaged in these days here, in a strange way, is related to something that seems like on a different planet. It's only 100 miles from here it happened, but it seems, if you look at the surroundings here and the people here, relatively very conscious compared to still a large part of the population of the planet. So it seems there are 2 different worlds, us here and the events that happened there. This is almost like a heavenly realm, and there it seems hell on earth happened, and yet they are not separate, they are related. And the inner work, for lack of a better word, that we are doing here is very closely related to what happened there. And this is what I've just been addressing here, to see how it is related, how your inner structures, those things are only more acute manifestations of that which each human being carries within. And it is now or never, really. If humanity does not go beyond those old mind structures, it will relive its history, and we know what that is like. Look at the 20th century. Oh my God. Compelled to relive history And of course the planet couldn't endure that. It would another 100 years of that, another century like this 20th century, without the mind structures of humans changing, but with increased technology. So what technology and science does, although it requires intelligence, of course, to produce science and technology, and they're not bad in themselves, but what it tends to do is magnify the effects of human unconsciousness. It magnifies it. Before, it was the same unconsciousness, but they couldn't do that much harm because they didn't have the means. They would have, but they did. So, if that change doesn't happen, it could be the end of humanity as a species. Pity. It was a good try. Consciousness will move through, and if consciousness wants to move through now and flower through this species, so there is a good chance that it will. So these are critical times. It could go one way or the other. The fact that we are here is a good sign. And change is happening. Of course, there is the reaction. Reactions are happening to the collective events. But there's also a deepening. I saw somebody said on TV that a writer, an American writer, I've forgotten the name. America tended to be, she said, type A personalities. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I assume it means extrovert, doing, going out, getting things done, doing, type A. And she perceived a shift from that, a deepening, a going within, which is, I have also seen, but there's also the reactivity happening in others. So we'll have to see which way it is going. The country could be swept by reactivity and unconsciousness, or there could be a deepening. And then if action is necessary, it would come out of that state of consciousness. It would be different from reactive action. So, how to be here these days that we are here? The essence is to remain awake to what arises in you and allow it to be. Observe thought structures, emotional fluctuations in yourself. Let them be. That's the spaciousness around them. Observe your mind. Either the mind when it's talking to yourself, to itself, the inner monologue or dialogue. Observe your mind also in interaction with other people. The energy behind it. And one could say a little tip for you for the next few days, and this is a good tip even to take beyond this retreat, is not to take your mind too seriously. That in itself is very liberating, because the very reason why we are here is to realize that we are much more than that, than the conditioned mental entity. So don't take it too seriously implies that there is an observing presence that knows that this is the mind. And so it's not automatically almost your mind isn't that serious anymore. So it implies, when I say don't take your mind too seriously, it implies a continuous observing presence that may arise even in the middle of a heated conversation. By the way, we may have periods of silence too here, but not continuously. Today, perhaps you will be engaged in conversations with people and so on, and you may have positions to defend, to put forward. You may have things to complain about. Not good enough, they shouldn't have. Why did they? Or the speaker, why doesn't he? He should. Why aren't we meditating? This should, that should, they should. Why doesn't he? Don't they? And you will see that when you're identified with mind, how much complaining it actually does. If not outwardly to others, some people are very good at that too. Inward complaining. It's a very deep-seated, because complaining, what is the strength? Why is that? And how is that related to the events in New York? When you complain, you are right. Somebody else or a situation around you is wrong. By being right and making someone or a situation around you wrong, you have strengthened your form identity, the me. And that to the me feels good. In reality, it feels bad. If you truly knew how it feels, you would know that it feels bad, and your body knows that it feels bad because it doesn't like that energy field. It actually gets sick if you are in that for years and years, because there's a continuous contraction. Energy cannot flow anymore because you're always, whenever you complain, there's a little contraction. And the egoic form identity loves that, because when I complain, I can be right. Somebody else can be wrong. Then I'm more fully myself. That feels good. So to watch that pattern of making wrong in yourself continuously, also, so to the essence of what complaining is, I'm not saying that if put up with whatever people do to you, this is not the kind of complaining when you say, stop treading on my toes. That's not complaining. I'm not talking about that. Or take your hand out of my bag when somebody's about to take your money. That's not complaining. That's not what I'm talking about. Or in a restaurant you say, take back this soup, it's cold, I'm not having it. That's not complaining either, but it could become complaining in a restaurant when you then say, how dare you put this, you give me this cold soup. What are you doing to me? And for the next 2 hours after you walk out of the restaurant, so to watch and to catch the complainer in your head, which is a very deep-seated mind structure, And it seems innocent enough, a little bit of complaining can't do anybody any harm. And yet, it's not that harmless at all. So that's a good thing to watch in yourself. And complaining, of course, is resistance to what is. And the egoic little me, the form identity, loves that too. It doesn't like what is. It would rather complain about what is. And even in the midst of beautiful surroundings, it will look for the one thing that it can complain about. So you are here also watching your mind and not condemning yourself when suddenly you realize that, for example, you have been complaining for the past 10 minutes or 2 hours in your head. Things may come, you're here for a few days, so many mental streams may arise in you. There may be one mental stream that says, well, I haven't had a spiritual experience, this obviously isn't working for me. I mean, I might as well go now. What's the point? I mean, think all the things I shouldn't have come here. I mean, I have so much to do at home to deal with. So, not to take your mind too seriously, and that is even an insult if there's anybody in this room completely identified still with their mind. This statement is insulting, because that statement implies, don't take yourself too seriously. What do you mean? I am serious. And it is liberating not to take your mind too seriously. And there's nothing personal in it. It's the human mind. It's not really you, it's not we personalize it, it's the human mind. And emotions come, perhaps pain body may come, accumulated pain from the past. It's human pain. There it is. So it's not only that you don't take it seriously, you don't take it personally. Especially that personal applies to the pain that arises in you, and it may arise perhaps in connection with the events that took place the last few days, which are dreadful. Pain may arise. Now, I'm not saying don't take that too seriously, let's leave that for the mind. But I'm saying don't take it personally. This has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. The same violence, the same pain. Allow it to be. Human pain. Allow it to be so completely that you feel almost gentle about it. In other words, a gentleness around it. With allowing comes a gentleness into your life. Non-allowing, And allowing always concerns the present moment. Non-allowing is a harshness and reactivity. So the gentleness comes in through allowing, even if the emotion is harsh or very painful. So there's a space around it. A space around it. And when you don't take your mind too seriously, there's also a space around your mind activity. So this is why we are here. And it is what could be greater than to step out of all that conditioning to a new level of consciousness. Not new in the sense that it hasn't been there before. The ancient teachers pointed to it. One could say it's always there, that spaciousness, but it's not there for you if you don't know it. You cannot do away with it and you cannot create it. It is the essence, it's consciousness itself, the vastness of the unconditioned consciousness. It's all pervasive. It is grace when you know it. It appears in your life as grace. When you don't know it, all the shutters in the house are closed. You'll sit in darkness, and the house is flooded by sunlight. That would be the same. Grace is there, but you don't know it. So in that sense, it's not there for you. Very helpful thing throughout this time that you are here and beyond is to feel the aliveness in your body, what I call the inner body. To have some connectedness with the inner energy field of your body, to feel in a very subtle sense, there is an aliveness there in every cell of the body. And that when I speak about this, it sounds as if I were encouraging you to identify with your physical body, but that's not the case. It's sensing that which pervades the body, but in itself is not the body, the very life, the very consciousness that appears temporarily as the body. Sense it as yourself. And then suddenly you feel alive. Every cell is alive. And you can still pay attention to your surroundings. That takes away attention from thinking. Relatively little thinking is needed here. And even in your life, the thinking that you need to do your work, that's fine. But most other thinking is very repetitive. It's the old mind structures. I'm not telling you to stop thinking because that would create a further problem. But we are going in that way and realize there is great intelligence beyond thought. Thought is a small aspect of that vast intelligence that you are. So here we are to allow that intelligence to arise. That is greater than the mind, but not separate from the human mind. And once you know that vast intelligence, the human mind functions beautifully when it's needed within that far greater whole. The human mind is fine then. You're not trapped in it as a form, seeking your identity in it, as a psychological form of me. So, dwelling in, inhabiting your body as you sit, speak to people. Easy to get drawn into mind when you start talking. Easy to identify with mental positions the moment you verbally interact with people. Less likely to happen when you inhabit your body as you listen to the other person. Oh, in a state of open presence. Listen to that viewpoint and give it space. Spaciousness arises. As you sit here and listen to my voice, be there totally with every cell of the body. Be here completely. Dwell, rest in your energy field. And then you're simply here as an alive, alert presence. And you can be that alive and alert presence without the baggage of past. It's not completely gone. It's still there. It may reassert itself from time to time. But to realize that you can be here as an alert presence without the baggage of past, which means without the interference of conceptualization and labeling. And you haven't become stupid in that. You're actually very intelligent in that state. That alertness itself, one could say, is pure intelligence, pure awareness. Thought can come out of it. Anything can come out of that. Everything creative comes out of that. That is going beyond the conditioning that's been running most humans for so long. So we are here to go beyond that conditioning of the mind. Beautiful, beautiful. And we don't have to make it happen, it is already arising. We will have a moment now of meditation, and we will begin on meditating. We honor the people who died those few days ago, and emotions that arise, we allow them to be. There may be sadness. There's no need to convince yourself mentally that all is well. No. Whatever emotion is there, you allow it. But you allow it completely. Sadness, or anger, or a mixture. Allowing it. May they know who they truly are beyond form. May I know who I truly am beyond form. See the fact of impermanence, of all forms dissolving. Allow that also to be. There's an ancient statement which most of you know, and that concerns all forms that arise. This too will pass. And if you allow the emotions that are there, or any thoughts that are there, be aware that that allowing is a spaciousness, a stillness. And many of those who died may have seen that in the last few seconds. And that is the flowering of consciousness. They may not have been ready on the surface. 10 minutes before they may have been watching a computer screen, and yet suddenly it came. And here the same death really is coming to you more gently. You can only be aware of the sacredness of life when you go beyond the forms of life. That is why death and sacredness are so strongly connected, and the modern world knows nothing about that. Whenever a form dissolves, death, that's called death, something shines through that is not the form, but it's the essence of the form. Traditionally, it was impossible to awaken spiritually unless death happened to you, psychological or close to physical death. Psychological death means you lose all the things that gave you your sense of self. Gone, 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 gone. Content was removed. The accumulated content was removed from your mind. And the last thing that goes is even beliefs, things that you could explain. The world doesn't make sense anymore, even that's gone. And you thought what this world was all about. Loss, death, loss, loss, loss. Dreadful on the surface. And yet, some of those people suddenly woke up, awakening, and realized they are not the content of their minds. They are not their form, their mental form. And it's usually simply realized as deep peace that cannot be threatened by anything. If it could speak, but usually that peace can't even say anything, it's just peace. If it could speak, it would say, there is no death. Life has no opposite. Birth has an opposite. Life has no opposite. But usually the peace doesn't speak. And that is the deepest meaning of those lines that I quoted earlier from the summary of the Course in Miracles. Nothing real can be threatened. Real is used in its deepest sense. The body is relatively real, but real in a deeper sense is only that which is not subject to birth and death, and that's the essence of your being. And you cannot grasp that. It fills this room. It fills your very being. But when the mind comes in and says, well, I'm still looking, because all the mind could do is look for further content. It is not in the realm of content. Our whole being together here is nothing to do with adding content to your mind, so that there's nothing here for the mind to grasp. It is subtle. So after our retreat, hopefully nobody is going to ask you, what did you get out of it? However, if they do ask you, the correct answer is nothing. Imagine the mind starting off. What did you get out of it? Well, let me think. Well, on the one hand, on the other hand. Thank you. Thank you.